Okay, you might have heard a loud noise. I dropped my recording studio. I dropped my iPhone. So anyway, we were right at a stopping point. Anyway, so we were talking about the cerebral cortex and the nerves, the different kinds of neurons that are found there. And we had said, we were talking about the layering, the 6 layers in that 2 to 3 millimeter thick neocortex. And then I dropped my phone. And so what I was going to talk about were what we call basal nuclei. And now I'd said, where do we find the neurons? We find them in the cerebral cortex and in nuclei. And so we have basal nuclei and the red nuclei, and some things we've already talked about. So you see here we have the cerebral cortex on the outside, but then deep down inside we have these various nuclei. And the region right in here, this is what we call the basal nuclei. And when we look at them, not this week, but next week in lab, you'll look at sheep brains and you'll say, there it is, I can see it. And you'll be able to see this stuff with some sliced up sheep brains. So we have these various deep nuclei that are going to be playing roles such as learning, and then things like controlling random movements. So a lot of these, the ones that aren't associated with learning and memory pathways, what you're going to find is the ones that aren't associated with that are going to be inhibiting unwanted movements. Sort of as a generalization. The globus pallidus regulates voluntary movement. The basal nuclei regulate voluntary movement. In most cases, they're trying to smooth out movements so that you can move like a ballerina, right? So you can move smoothly. All right, so we have these deep areas where we have nuclei, where we have cell bodies of neurons. And then we have another region. We have this thing here. It's called the limbic system, and it's some of the stuff you were seeing. This is the thalamus here, which is what we're seeing there in the middle. So most of this is going to be buried on the inside. So this is inside of here. So it's inside of there, and we have different parts to it. So we had said we have the thalamus here, we have the pediment here, we have the hippocampus here, and we have the amygdala. And so the amygdala is going to be, these are all going to be playing roles in either learning or emotional behaviors. So the pediment is this part right here. It's going to be involved in, they say it's, when you read about it, they say it's part of a complicated pathway that coordinates the preparation for movement of your arms and legs. Good to know, right? So anyway, some of these have very obtuse kinds of functions, but they're clearly visible. So the pediment, not a very exciting function, but what can you do? It's just what it is. We then have another region right here. It's just above the corpus callosum, and it's called the Cingulate Gyrus, and it is going to coordinate sensory inputs and with emotions, emotional responses to pain, and regulations of aggressive behavior. Wow. Okay, so we had said this part of the brain, these deeper nuclei here, They're going to either be involved in sort of coordinating, smoothing out movements or emotions or learning. Now here we're talking about emotions. So the cingulate gyrus is going to be playing a role in emotions. And then we have the amygdala, these little balls sort of here at the end, and then the part that communicates with it, that's called the hippocampus. And on the next slide, we're going to see that the amygdala is all about fear and anger and that kind of stuff. And the hippocampus is going to be about learning. Okay, so let's see what it says. The hippocampus organizes unified long-term memory. Remember, we had said we have long-term memory that lasts forever, and it's represented by a memory trace, which is a pathway through the neurons in your brain. And so when you are trying to remember something that you will carry with you forever, basically, what happens is one part of your brain is going to be repeating, or the short-term memory is going to be repeating this memory to the hippocampus, and it's going to be producing the long-term memory trace. And and we'll talk about there's a region just on top of the hippocampus that's called the dentate gyrus. And this is going to be where the neurons come from. So we'll look at that next slide. But anyway, so we have the hippocampus. This is where we're making those long-term memories. And then we have that amygdala, that little ball kind of at the end there of the hippocampus. And it plays a role in food intake, am I hungry? Sexual activity, emotional, or being drawn to something new. You say, wow, I've never seen that before, right? So that's the amygdala. Now, as with all of these brain regions, how do we know what they do? Well, the way we know is if you damage them. And a very sort of very destructive kind of brain injury is one where you damage the amygdala. You know why? I bet you don't. They're scared of nothing. It abolishes fear. That truck, that train, it can't hurt me. You don't live very long. Fear is a good thing. Fear is a good thing. You need to be scared of that giant truck or that train. But anyway, that's where it is. And we know it through these lesion type studies. Okay, yeah. So that's the limbic system. All right, then I do have one more slide dealing with this thing here. So here we have the hippocampus in purple, and the amygdala here in front of it. And you see that kind of bluish right there, those little teeth-like things, that is called the dentate gyrus. And if you think about it, if you're going to have a pathway that is of a new memory, that means that you're going to be having to make new neurons. How do you So you make new neurons that take part in the new memories, and the neurons, the source of those neurons is the dentate gyrus. And we had said this is only one of two locations in the central nervous system where you, throughout life, produce neurons. The dentate gyrus and in your nose. It ends up the sensory structures in your nose, sensing, olfaction, smell, they are neurons. And they're exposed to all of the chemicals and things that you come into contact with, so they have to be replaced because they die. And so that's the other location. Neurons for sensing olfaction and neurons for new memories in the dentate gyrus. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and we'll be right back.